Winston Churchill was a famous leader in England during World War II. Some people accuse him of causing a terrible famine in India in 1943, where many people died because they didn't have enough food. But there are other people who say these accusations are not true. They believe the famine happened because of a combination of problems, not just because of Churchill. He was far away, fighting a war, and didn't have all the information about what was happening in India. One person named Madhusri Mukherjee wrote a book called Churchill's Secret War, claiming Churchill was to blame, but many experts disagree with that book. They say the famine was caused by both nature and mistakes made by local leaders in India. Churchill did try to send help to India once he knew about the famine, but it was a complicated situation, and getting food there was not easy during the war. Churchill's real name was Sir Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill, and he was the British wartime Prime Minister during World War II. His job was to lead his country during the difficult times of war, and he had many challenges to deal with. Some people criticized Churchill for being racist and making mean comments about Indians. They say he didn't like Indian leaders who wanted independence for their country. However, others say these comments need to be seen in the context of Churchill's personality and his way of speaking. He was known for making strong and sometimes shocking statements to get people's attention. Even though Churchill might have made mistakes in the past, he did try to help India when he knew about the famine. There were challenges in sending food, but eventually, aid did arrive in Bengal, the Indian province affected by the famine. The truth about the famine is more complicated than just blaming Churchill for it. Many factors contributed to it, and while he might have made mistakes in the past, he did try to help when he could. It's essential to learn from history and understand the different perspectives to get a complete picture of what happened. The famine took place at the height of World War II, with the Japanese already occupying Burma and invading the British Indian province of Bengal, bombing its capital, Calcutta, and patrolling its coast with submarines. The famine raged for about 6 months, from the summer of 1943 until the end of that year, and estimates of its victims range from 500,000 upwards, depending on whether one includes its indirect and long-term effects. Most famine experts agree that famines can be caused by both nature and human agency, but never by any single individual. The attempt to lay this at Churchill's door stems from a sensationalist book by a Bengali-American journalist called Madhusri Mukherjee. As its title, Churchill's Secret War, indicates, it was a largely conspiracist attempt to pin responsibility on distant Churchill for undoubted mistakes on the ground in Bengal. The actual evidence shows that Churchill believed, based on the information he had been getting, that there was no food supply shortage in Bengal, but a demand problem caused by local mismanagement of the distribution system. Ironically, his view found unexpected support in a 2010 exchange between Mukherjee and the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen, the world's foremost expert on famine in India. Commenting in the New York Times, Sen said of Mukherjee that she seemed satisfied with little information, and that her data came from only 2 rice research stations, and those in only 2 out of 27 districts in Bengal. The analysis I made, countered Sen, using data from all districts, indicated that food availability in 1943, the famine year, was significantly higher than in 1941, when there was no famine. There was indeed a substantial shortfall compared with demand, hugely enhanced in a war economy. But that is quite different from a shortfall of supply compared with supply in previous years. Mukherjee seems to miss this crucial distinction, and in her single-minded attempt to nail down Churchill, she ends up absolving British imperial policy of confusion and callousness. Provincial autonomy, with democratically elected ministries, was the result of the British-sponsored 1935 constitution, designed to give India dominion status, like Canada and Australia, once its princes and politicians agreed on a federal central government. Churchill, no friend to Indian independence or dominion status, had considered the constitution premature, and had fought its adoption tooth and nail in the House of Commons in the 1930s, at the cost of dooming himself to the backbenches for a decade. By the 1940s, nonetheless, he regarded the food situation in Bengal as primarily a matter for its elected ministry rather than Whitehall. Within the War Cabinet itself, Churchill's role was one of broad oversight rather than detailed management, so the idea that he had much influence on actual relief aid to Bengal is far-fetched, especially at the height of the war. 1943 had begun as a year of normal harvest, leaving the Bengal ministry sanguine about food supplies and the Viceroy's government in Delhi reluctant to intervene, using its reserve powers. Once the Viceroy did intervene, the famine was rapidly brought under control and petered out within months. And it was Churchill who replaced the lethargic Lord Linlithgow as Viceroy with the efficient and politically sensitive Field Marshal Archibald Wavell, brought in partly to address the famine. Even Mukherjee never blames Churchill for actually causing the Bengal famine, but for compounding it by refusing to allow shipments of grain from Australia and Canada, bound for Europe, to be diverted to Bengal. Mukherjee's camp followers have taken this accusation further with fantastical claims that Bengal was being forced to export food to Ceylon, while Australian food shipments were forced to sail past Calcutta without stopping en route to Europe. The fact is that Bengal only ever sent one food shipment to Ceylon that year, and it was an equal exchange of grain for rice. As for Australian food shipments being diverted from Calcutta, one has only to look at a map to see what a nonsense it would have been for Australian ships bound for Europe to come anywhere near the Bay of Bengal and run the gauntlet of Japanese submarines. The true facts about food shipments to Bengal, amply recorded in the British War Cabinet and Government of India archives, are that more than 1 million tons of grain arrived in Bengal between August 1943, when the War Cabinet first realized the severity of the famine, and the end of 1944, when the famine had petered out. To Churchill must go the credit for appointing the man arguably most responsible for these successes. This was food aid specifically sent to Bengal, much of it on Australian ships, despite strict food rationing in England and severe food shortages in newly liberated southern Italy and Greece. As detailed in Andrew Roberts's brilliant biography, far from seeking to starve India, Churchill and his cabinet sought every possible way to alleviate the suffering without undermining the war effort. On the 4th of August 1943, when Churchill's War Cabinet first realized the enormity of the famine, it agreed that 150,000 tons of Iraqi barley and Australian wheat should be sent to Bengal, with Churchill himself insisting on the 24th of September that something must be done. Though emphatic that Indians are not the only people who are starving in this war, he agreed to send a further 250,000 tons.